Hey guys, today I wanted to do a video on battling depression. Now, this is something that I've struggled with for probably 20 plus years, and I'm going to kind of tell you my story and just give you my perspective on it. I have to give you my story to kind of give some background, but I'll promise it all makes sense at the end. Now, I think about the age of 10, I started to become depressed. I also suffered from insomnia and obsessive compulsive disorder as well. For instance, as a kid, I remember getting these thoughts that would say, so-and-so is going to die in a car crash, and I would have to do a ritual or a compulsion 3 times so that it wouldn't happen. So for me, that was kind of shaking my head like this, so that it wouldn't happen. And I know that sounds silly to people, and to be honest, I thought I was the only person in the world who did these things, and it wasn't until later that I started doing more research that I realized there's actually, it's actually a disease. There's actually other people that suffer with this. So, fast forward a bit, I think by the time I grew up and went to high school, it was really bad. I was struggling big time. And I was so stressed out, I was actually losing my hair in places where you don't normally lose your hair, like the side of your head, and places like that. And, I basically got to the point where I just said, I can't do this anymore. And I just said, I'm going to stop doing the rituals. I'm going to stop the compulsions. So I would still get the thoughts, but I just wouldn't do the ritual. I wouldn't shake my head. And then eventually those thoughts started going away, but I actually started getting really bad headaches. They were kind of like lightning strike headaches. So they would just, come out of nowhere and sort of hit me like this. And it was maddening. And, basically I did more research and I came to conclude that these headaches were actually caused by depression, from a very severe depression. So, I went and saw a psychologist, and then they referred me to a psychiatrist, and then they started prescribing me Zoloft. And, I started taking that. They kept upping the dose because it wasn't working. And basically they said, if we can't go any higher, otherwise we got to go to antipsychotics. That really kind of scared me. It scared my mom. And so fortunately, the highest dose they could give me started to work. And when I say it worked, I mean it sort of made things less crazy in my head. It didn't make me happy. It just sort of made things manageable, right? It kind of just muted everything. And so fast forward a bit more, I think about the time I was a junior in high school, I started smoking pot. And that helped. That helped at least lift my spirits. It helped make life interesting again. It helped me sleep. And so I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I did a lot of it. And that caused a lot of rifts with me and my parents, who were very against it. And so I felt like it was helping me. They felt like I was going down a bad path. It created a lot of turmoil in the household. Okay, so, I graduate high school, I go off to college, and then it's sort of just like, no holds barred, right? I had been getting into psychedelics and hallucinogens and also drinking a lot. And, looking back, I loved to alter my mind. I loved seeing things through a different lens. I loved on hallucinogens how objects would move and this and that. And I wasn't really spiritually seeking. I was just, I just like to alter my mind. I used to take a bunch of psychedelics and go to a show, and looking back, I kind of realized that psychedelics open you up to the spiritual realm, and when you're in that state, anything can come through. And I believe some bad things did come through. I basically invited some bad things in and allowed them to dwell within me, and kind of going forward from there, life started to get pretty crazy. I got into a lot of trouble in my college years, and I went down a very bad path. I almost died. I almost went to prison. By the grace of God, I actually was able to graduate somehow, and ended up going into the corporate world. And I did about 6 months of that before I almost lost my mind and just had to go into the woods and kind of reevaluate things. And then I would do this cycle of I would work enough and I would travel. So I started traveling across the country and just trying to figure out what the point of all this is. It was there that I kind of landed on I got my first farming experience. And that was a key for me because it at least gave me like, okay, I like this. This feels good. This feels like meaningful work, right? But I was still pretty messed up. And so I eventually ended up getting addicted to heroin, almost dying numerous times from that. Eventually it got clean, and then I had to figure out how to get off the pills. Once in college, I started taking benzodiazepines, things like Klonopin, not because I needed them, but just because I like to get messed up. And the thing with those is they're very hard to get off. Heroin you could kick in maybe a matter of weeks. I'm just going cold turkey. Benzodiazepines, you can't do that. You have to go down in small increments over a long period of time, or you will experience psychosis. Basically, what happens is your brain stops producing those chemicals that calm you down naturally. It becomes dependent on the synthetic version. And so if you stop the synthetic version, your brain just can't uptick production like that. And so you really do, you hear voices and you can even die. So luckily, I was able to get off of those in increments. I had to work out like a maniac. I ate very healthy. I ended up meeting a girl at that time, and we ended up, falling in love, and we ended up traveling the country together, starting a farm, and having 3 beautiful children together. And so, I think once I started farming, and once I became a farmer and a father, I had this sense of purpose, of meaning. I was doing work I enjoyed. I was living a healthy lifestyle, getting lots of exercise, eating good. I was passionate about it. And being a father forced me to kind of put others before myself, which was really good for me. But there was still something missing. There was still kind of this, I wouldn't say I was depressed, I would say, but there was still something kind of missing within me. And so anyway, this is where I might lose some of you, and that's okay. I have to tell it this way because this is how I experienced it, and so you can take it for what it's worth. To give you a little bit more background, I was raised Roman Catholic. I went to Catholic school as a kid, and I started falling away from it sometime in high school, and by the time I graduated college, I was very far removed from it. I studied philosophy, and I got really into Friedrich Nietzsche, the idea that there is no truth. I basically, whether I knew it or not, was sort of a nihilist. And and I studied Buddhist philosophy, and I studied Hindu philosophy, and I did find some peace in things like yoga and meditation. So looking back, I would have probably said I'm spiritual, not religious, right? And because I had done a deep dive on everything, and I wanted to figure out, what's the meaning of life? How did all of this get here, right? And the more I looked into the science behind everything, even seeing how just the laws of physics of the universe are so finely tuned for our existence, it was hard for me to conclude anything other than, yes, somebody had to create, somebody had to put this into motion. I would say I believe in Spinoza's God. As Einstein said, he believed in Spinoza's God. Einstein could see all this. He studied physics. He discovered new laws of physics. And, by the end of his life, he was like, this is spooky. It's spooky how finely tuned everything is. And, order does not arise from chaos. And so there had to be a creator, but he didn't believe that there was a creator that actually cares about us, about how, how we're doing or whether we worship him or anything like that. He just concluded that there is a creator, and that's where he kind of left it. And he said, I believe in Spinoza's God, referring to Baruch Spinoza. Anyway, that's kind of where I was, right? And I kind of just figured, whether there is a God or there isn't, whether there is a heaven or a hell, I'm not going to live my life any different, right? I'm still going to be a farmer. I'm still going to, be a good person, or what I thought was being a good person. And, nothing would change. I'm still going to live my life exactly the same. So it wasn't that I didn't believe in God. It was just that God was kind of irrelevant to me. And, anyway, that's just how I lived my life. I focused on building the farm and being a dad and doing all these things. And around 2020, that was a very hard year. The world as I had experienced it no longer made sense, because, I could see tyranny, and I could see, and I understood that corporations are greedy. I understood that politicians are corrupt, but, I was like, what's going on with Karen? Like, what's causing her to act? I saw people losing their minds and becoming very cruel, and just, none of it made sense to me anymore. And I think at the end of 2020, I kind of hit this low point where I felt like my life was falling apart. And I felt like, I don't know. I don't have it figured out. And I think that little bit started to humble me. That little bit of that I don't know, that I don't have it figured out, started to humble me. And it was around that same time that this person I had listened to for a long time started to actually describe the events that I was seeing sort of in spiritual terms, and in just describing this is a spiritual battle. And through that context, it all actually started to make a lot more sense. It actually explained reality better than anybody else I was hearing at the time. And so it was around that time that this person started coming to Orthodox Christianity. And they were never that way before, but they, started to make that journey. And for me, it at least started to crack the door open a little bit, because, I'll be honest, I had a big wall up against Christianity. I saw too much hypocrisy. I saw corruption. I saw all these things, these shortcomings of man, and I attributed that to God. And it made it seem like this isn't the way. This isn't the way, because look at all these people, and they're doing this and they're doing that. It has nothing to do with God, has nothing to do with Christ, but for me, it created this wall. It also, I remember getting almost angry at people who claim to know the truth. And I said, you can't know that. You're claiming to know something that is unknowable. And for some reason, that actually made me kind of angry. So I had this big wall up against Christianity. And I will admit that coming into 2021, that wall started to break down a little bit, just a little bit. That door started to crack open just a little bit. I started to say, okay, well, maybe these Bible stories have some value. Maybe they're describing the kind of this archetypal, version of humanity, these patterns that reoccur. So there's things that they can teach us. Okay, I'll give you. But little by little, that door started to crack open, right? And I'd say around the summer of that year, I was searching. I was trying to figure out what this empty void inside of me was. And I did an ayahuasca ceremony, and the last night of the ceremony, I kind of had this experience where, I came to peace with all the anger that I was feeling in 2020. I could see the tyranny, and it made me angry that people were just going along with it. And I realized that this is the wrong response, that being angry and having, hatred towards these tyrannical individuals, as I saw them, was only hurting me. And I also had this feeling of being called into battle. And so fast forward a couple more months, I do another ceremony, and that door had continued to crack open, right? And so going into the ceremony, they tell you to bring an object of significance, right? So I brought this cross. I've had this cross for a long time. I don't know where I got it. And I brought it with me, and I'm sitting there before the ceremony starts, and I get this terrible pain in my neck and in my shoulder, and I'm thinking, oh man, I'm gonna have to sit this whole ceremony with this terrible pain. And this voice in my head just said, put the cross on it. All right, so I put the cross on it. And at that same instant, I had this other thought that said, oh, this is nothing for God. Like, to heal your shoulder right now is nothing for God. And at that instant, the pain went away. It just completely vanished. That's weird. Okay, so, we're waiting for the ceremony to start. We hadn't even drank any of the medicine yet. And, we're going around the room, and everyone shares their intention. And I mentioned how at the last ceremony, I had this feeling of being called into battle. And I said, I would just like some clarity on what that means, because I'm ready to serve. Okay, those words, I'm ready to serve, are key, right? And so I get up, I drink the first cup of medicine, I go lay back down, and I just intuitively, I just felt like, I'm gonna put this cross on my chest. So I just laid there with the cross on my chest, I fell asleep. I woke up, oh man, okay, I'm rested now, I'm gonna go drink the second cup, I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna fall asleep, right? Put the cross on my chest, now fall asleep again. Wake up the next morning, ceremony's over. I had no visions, nothing like that. Nothing happened. I just slept through the whole thing. But I felt changed. I felt different. Something shifted. Something was pulled off of me. And it wasn't just that day. It wasn't just that week. This sort of completely changed my reality. I started to experience life differently. I remember, like the week after, I was filled with such joy. I would be just doing a simple thing like pushing my daughter on her bike, and all of a sudden this joy would start to bubble up inside of me. And I had never experienced this before. I mean, it was like this heaviness was just pulled off of me, and now I could just enjoy life as it was meant to be enjoyed. I wasn't striving after this or going after that. For the first time that I can remember, I felt just content and happy. Things started to resonate with me before, like never before. I became hungry to listen to the Gospels. And I realized I'd never actually heard the Gospels the whole way through. I just heard tidbits here and there, but I'd never actually listened to it as a narrative. And so I started, listening to it. And I found myself having to pause it and just sit with the words because they were hitting me in a way that I had never heard. And this, you got to understand, I had grown up in church. I had grown up hearing these stories. I had never heard them like this before. And then the Bible phrase, "For those with eyes to see and ears to hear," finally made sense to me. I realized that I could not see it before. I couldn't hear it before. I couldn't experience it before. I had a wall up, and that wall was my pride. That wall was my pride in saying like, no, I know best. I know what, I'm going to do this. As soon as that started to fall down and crumble, and I opened my heart to Christ, there he was. And the crazy thing is, there was no condemnation, because when I was not a very good person, when I was deep into my drug and alcoholism, I was not a good person. I had done many shameful things. I had turned my back on God. And you would think, coming back, that God would almost be like, "Oh, you turned your back on me," but it's not like that at all. It was a full embrace. It was a full embrace, and it took me back. And so this has been the experience, Fast forward, maybe it took me another 8 months, and I started to, I became hungry to actually, go to church again. But I wanted to find what's the real church? What's the true church? And, I finally went into an Orthodox Christian church and had a very different experience than anything. I'd gone to the mega churches. I'd grown up in the Catholic Church, all this. The Orthodox Church hit me differently. It was mystical. It felt like I was walking into another country. Everything from the chanting to the incense to the icons, it just, I'd be standing there in this building in the first 10 minutes, and I've got tears coming down my cheeks, and I'm like, I don't know what's happening right now, but this is something I've never experienced before, and I'm leaving 10 pounds lighter. So I keep coming into this experience, and as I'm doing this, I'm realizing this is more mystical than any psychedelic I've ever done. And in fact, I haven't even felt called to do psychedelics anymore, because I'm experiencing that mysticism in real time. And how I was always trying to change my mind and alter my mind through substances, now I'm just content in my natural state. And it's incredible. It's not to say that I don't ever experience sadness or hardship, but I have the tools to deal with it. And you have to understand that sadness is not the same as depression. Feeling sad because someone you love has passed away is normal. That's normal. It's normal to cry. That's okay. Feeling depressed is literally an inability to experience any happiness at any moment. And I remember thinking, I'll never be happy. I don't believe I can ever be happy. And I truly believed that. I felt like, the happiest I'll ever be was when I was 7, and it's all been downhill from there. I was trying so hard to take myself off of this earth because I hated myself and I hated my life. And through God's mercy, he spared me. I mean, I came pretty close. I won't go into the details, but people that know me know how close I came. Some of this I don't know how to explain how I'm still here. But I'm so thankful to God that I am still here. I didn't know I could be this happy. I didn't know that I could have this sense of joy and wonder and just the simplicity of life. And so I'm eternally grateful. And the reason I'm making this You know, I'm not trying to preach, I'm not trying to get on a high horse or anything, but for those who are struggling with this, I get it. I get it. It's a spiritual battle. You know, Western medicine wants to say it's a chemical imbalance. That's what I was told. It's a chemical imbalance. And if we could just get the chemicals right in your head, then you'd be happy. It's not how it works. Look, I'm not denying the fact that when I was depressed, if you could have done a brain scan, it sure as heck would have showed all kinds of imbalances. But that was a symptom. That was a physiological description of the symptoms, not the cause. The cause is spiritual in nature. And the reason I know this is because a chemical imbalance, it doesn't just resolve itself overnight. You know, it doesn't just resolve itself overnight in the name of Jesus Christ. It doesn't just get pulled off of you. I realize it's a spiritual battle that we're in. And you cannot solve a spiritual problem with a materialist solution. So something like, sure, eating healthy, working out, doing meaningful work, getting 8 hours of sleep, great. That can help. CBD oil, sure, that can help. All good things. But at the end of the day, it's a spiritual problem, and it needs to be addressed on a spiritual level. Now, I've gone down other spiritual avenues. I practiced meditation, I practiced yoga, I was very into the New Age. None of that pulled this off of me. In fact, some of it might have made it worse. The only healing I have found is through Christ. And, you know, the church is really like a hospital. Like, I'm not going to church and I'm not walking this path because I want to check a box or so that I'll get into heaven. I'm in church because I'm sick. I'm spiritually sick. We all are. And that's the medicine right there. And you need to find the true church because that's going to be the strongest medicine. The further away you get from that, the medicine gets diluted. And sometimes it can even have toxins added to it. So for me, that's why. It's not about saying I'm this, saying I'm that, thinking that I somehow am better than these other people. If that's you, you're missing it. It's about healing. It's about transformation. And it's only through Christ that I have found this transformation, that this transformation has been able to take place. And the deeper I go, the more real it becomes. You can take psychedelics and have this experience, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like, you know, you say you have the spiritual experience, but you still took drugs to get there. When you start having these mystical experiences completely sober, and things are being revealed through you in intuition or through dreams, or you're praying for something and then you receive it, whether you're praying for strength, you receive strength, you pray for guidance, you receive guidance, you start to see that there is a God. There is a God. He actually does care about you. He actually does love you in a way that our brains cannot even understand. But God does not force himself upon us. He created us with free will. So we have to choose to accept him, to ask Christ to come into our hearts. And I believe during the ceremony, that's what happened. Now, it had been leading up to that. But sleeping with the cross on my heart and saying I'm ready to serve and all the preparation leading up to it, I believe allowed that to happen. Like I said, you can take it for what it's worth. This is just my experience. But how else do you explain all of this? How else do you explain how we're here? The materialist explanations don't make any sense. They leave so many holes. You basically have to believe in a multiverse or an infinite universe theory, which then begs the question, well, who's creating all these universes? And then how do you explain all of these phenomena through a materialist lens? You can't. You have to just chalk it up to, oh, this person's making it up, or this person's hallucinating, or this and that. It's like, no. Like, really, look at the evidence and just try to actually ask yourself, how are we here? How is any of this happening? And I am not unique. I'm not the only person that's had this experience. There's literally 2,000 years of tradition of Holy Fathers saying, do these things, then you'll have the experience, then you'll know what we're talking about. We won't need to explain it to you. The path is there. for whoever wants to walk it. The only thing that's needed from you is to humble yourself and to come before God, to open your heart to Christ. And then you will start to have the experience, and things will start to be revealed to you. Things will start to be pulled off of you. Whether that's addiction, whether that's depression, because it wasn't just that depression that lifted. These hooks, he said, I had deep problems, deep hooks, drugs and alcohol, lust, all these things. They start to get uprooted, and you start to experience how we were meant to be. You start to experience this freedom unlike anything that you could imagine. So if you're out there and you're battling depression, and you're watching this, I pray that you'll accept Christ into your heart. I pray that you will humble yourself enough to have the experience, to start walking that path. Because I'm not unique in this. There's been millions and millions and millions of people who have had the same experience. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I'll see you all next time.